Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals. Today we're talking about the L3 Atpial-C, the civilian legal version of the PEC-15, and the Villain Weapon Systems Diffuser. Now, the civilian/gray market/fell of a truck en route is a very confusing and treacherous place. Imagine, if you will, a place where $4,000 will get you everything you've ever wanted, $2,000 will get you nothing, and $1,000 will get you halfway there somehow. And this is unfortunately in a dead zone of price and performance, and speaking of price, the Atpial-C minus the Villain Weapons Diffuser is about $1,500 to $2,000 for a underpowered piece of plastic. Now before we get into basics, go ahead and show that like button a good time. Full disclosure on the Atpial-C is that this was sent to me for review by a kind viewer of the channel. I have no relationship with the people putting these laser units out to the public. The laser aiming module is also sent to me with the Villain Weapon Systems Diffuser, which we will discuss towards the end. Now, starting out with construction, we have a mostly plastic body holding together our IR Illuminator, IR Laser, and Red Viz Laser. My version is the tan model, though they come in black as well. At the back of the unit, we have our battery tray for our CR123A battery. Runtime is rated at about 6 IRs with dual IR illumination and IR laser, which is pretty good, though of course the power is low, so the battery life should be good. Towards the middle of the unit, we have our fire button. It's large, slightly recessed into the body, feels tactile enough. Modes of operation are pretty simple: press for momentary and double tap for constant. Moving forward, we have two sets of turrets, one for adjusting the illuminator so the lasers can be properly centered, and one set for actually adjusting your co-aligned Viz and IR lasers. The advantage of having co-aligned lasers and a single set of turrets is that you can zero during the day with the Viz laser and be ready to go at night with the IR laser. Also, having one set of turrets is just much nicer. At the front of the unit on the right hand side, we have our two lasers and laser cover. The outboard laser is the Viz laser and the inboard is IR. The inboard laser is still about a ½ inch or so off center line, so you can either set it up with a converging zero or a constant offset. But to be real with you, dog, you won't be shooting far enough with this for that to ever matter much. And of course, on the other side of the unit, we have our IR illuminator and diffuser cap. The mount is a nice squared off crossbolt that clamps the plastic shell to your rail. Do not over torque it, the plastic will snap with enough force. Total system weight is under 8 ounces, which isn't bad, but I would still like to not have a plastic body on a unit this expensive. Before we get to the performance, let's talk about modes of operation. You really only have two modes that you're ever going to use: the Viz laser to 0, which is one click counterclockwise, and then the dual IR laser and illuminator. The unit might have markings for the high power modes, but those are just there to make you feel better about wasting $1,500. This is the civilian legal laser because the FDA hates you, so you only get a 3 milliwatt illuminator with a fixed spread that measures out at 1 milliwatt at the brightest point to be legal. So jumping into performance, it's really not great. The laser is appropriately powered. 99% of the time, a civilian-powered laser is great. It's really the illuminator where you want or need that extra juice so that you can actually illuminate and engage targets. Depending on ambient lighting, the Atpial-C has an optimistic 75-yard engagement range where you can positively identify, engage, and neutralize targets. That's $1,500 for half the power of a Streamlight HLX. So now let's talk about that diffuser and what it's good for. Villain Weapon Systems makes diffusers for all sorts of items, IR and otherwise. The point of a diffuser in this case is to add quick focus adjustment to whatever you install it onto, in this case the Atpial-C. Now, VWS also has two different versions of their current iteration and a few different generations. So this is a slightly older model, so updated models might have fixed some of the issues that I have. The cap that I have when activated is very tight. It takes about a 10-foot beam at 50 yards down to about 3 feet, so it's a very tight pattern. So it's able to take whatever limited power you have and really focus that down into a theoretically more usable pattern. The light transmission on the cap itself is roughly 90%. Keep in mind you are losing a little bit, but hopefully in a more usable way. And that sounds really nice on paper. Unfortunately, most of the time it's the worst of both worlds. With the cap flipped out of the way, it can be used to sweep to find and illuminate targets up close and effectively engage them without overexposing your tubes and washing out the image. The downside is that in a mixed lighting environment, it will not have the power to penetrate any sort of oppositional light, and of course it really is not going to provide good illumination past 50 yards, 75 is kind of pushing it. With the diffuser cap flipped on, you get a super tight beam that will punch out to over 100 yards, maybe even 100, 150 plus yards on the top end in good conditions. The problem is that there's no margin for error at all. I have some targets set up here between 20 and 120 yards, and keep in mind that I know where they are because of course I set them up. But the beam is so small and focused that it's mostly useless for finding targets. Now, once you do find a target, it's also pretty useless inside 100 yards because the beam is so tight that it ends out washing out your laser a little bit, and it turns the whole area into a white blob of light with no definition whatsoever. There is this dead zone of usability where between 75 and 100 yards, neither setting works well. Between 50 yards and in and 100 yards and out, maybe out to 150 or so, it only works okay. And of course, this is all going to be dependent on your night vision unit and your ambient lighting conditions. Keep in mind, I'm using a cheap AGM 2+ white phos unit with a approximately 1400 to 1600 FOM, so that is going to project a worse image of the unit's capabilities than if I had a 2500 plus FOM Gen 3 unit with better glass. Now, some other quirks of the VWS cap that I have is that it doesn't always flip into the correct position every time. So sometimes I would flip it on and it would not quite find where it's supposed to go on its own, meaning that the illuminator beam would be off-centered by several feet because it didn't quite click in. Again, you have a very tight beam pattern, so when it's off by a foot or two at 100 yards, that laser is either unusable or just around the edge of what's actually being illuminated. Also, the tension bands on my unit have loosened up a little bit over time, and sometimes they slip out of the channel. I hope that aspect has been improved in current models, considering these are north of $100 for a little bit of 3D printed plastic, but the lenses do work and give you a little bit of additional flexibility. But again, I'm really not sold on the Atpial-C, so getting something that makes something bad a little bit less bad for the low price of $2,000, it's really not an attractive option whatsoever. If you wanted this style of unit, unironically, the Holosun 321 is better. Still a bad value in my opinion. I think there are better options coming soon and some more innovative options out there currently. Right now, this is really a legacy / cloner unit that are just a waste of money for 99% of people. But with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.